BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Amy Canavan and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Tuesday the 18th of March. And the talk of the town is still Sunday's Old Firm derby.
Barry and his team, he'll be looking to try and do a lot more positive in the domestic form. That way, it might kind of strengthen his hand to try and get the job permanently.
Is Barry Ferguson now in the driving seat to get the manager's job on a permanent basis? A former teammate has weighed in on the discussion, and there's been yet another managerial department in the Championship.
Some news that's been confirmed in the last few minutes. Dunfermline Athletic are looking for their third manager of the season following the sacking of Michael Tidser after just 2 months in the job.
Michael Tidser has lost his job at Dunfermline after just 60 days in charge. Plus, we get the lowdown on Scotland's opponents on Thursday.
They have nicked it in injury time. Wild celebrations for Greece. This will be their first ever win against England.
We'll find out everything we need to know about Greece.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sport Scotland.
Who said international breaks were quiet, eh? Plenty to get through this Tuesday morning, and joining me to do so, mostly for domestic matters, unless he's been dabbling in Greek football, is fittingly former Rangers, Dundee and Dunfermline striker Rory Loy. And for all things Greece, we have Stephen Kountourou from the Hellas Football Podcast joining us in a bit. But first, let's discuss domestic matters, and we'll start with the aftermath of two scintillating derbies on Sunday. Rory, good morning to you. I think it's fairly safe to say that when Barry Ferguson was appointed interim manager a few weeks back, few folks probably would have thought on this Tuesday morning after the Old Firm derby in this moment that his case to be the permanent Rangers manager would probably be as strong and have as much support as it does at this stage. How do you just about sum up the last few days, the last few weeks at Ibrox, really?
Morning, Amy. Well, it's been a bit of a whirlwind. Clement quite simply had to leave his post. The pressure was mounting to a stage where it was almost becoming uncomfortable for him leaving games, and the amount of games he was performing poorly in and losing. So, Barry Ferguson comes in, has a great start down at Kilmarnock. I was at that game. After half an hour, I did not see Rangers taking anything from the game. And they came back and get 3 points. I don't think under Clement they would have been able to do that. So that was a tick against Barry Ferguson's name straight away. You move forward, disappointing defeat against Motherwell, and you think it's the same old cycle. But like qualification against Fenerbahce, and then the weekend, it's a game against Celtic. I think one thing he has done is show. It's a very small sample size, Amy, but he's shown pretty quickly that he's tactically astute enough to be able to go toe-to-toe with Brendan Rodgers, with Jose Mourinho. So, that's got to play in his favour when it comes for any aspirations he has for getting the job. I also actually think Celtic coming back to 2 each and Rangers still winning the game was probably one of the best ways Barry Ferguson could have won that game, because again I think they showed a side to them that they weren't able to show under previous managers. So look, I still don't know if it'll be enough with the takeover and things for him to have, to be any form of front runner for the job. But if he can continue in the vein of form that which they're in, look after the so-called run-of-the-mill games, against the lesser teams in the league. If he can get past Bilbao and beat Celtic, I'm saying that as if that's easy, and it's so far from easy. Bilbao are a top side. Then he gives himself a stronger case. But at this moment in time, I still think he's got a lot to do if he wants to be in the hot seat come the start of next season.
There is obviously so much happiness and relief among the Rangers support from recent results, but I was sifting through some of the fan replies that we get on the website, and there was still a bit of frustration as well, and I think a lot of folks will understand that frustration, because where has this team been all season, Rory? Why are we now seeing a Rangers team, and I think a midfield especially, looking so strong and looking so confident?
Yeah, I don't know where the kind of the failure in communication came under the previous manager, but they look more organised. They look like, listen, a lot of people put it down to, Barry Ferguson, ex-Rangers man, he knows the club and he's got this heart and drive and determination. That's a small added bonus, but I think that he's able to convey clear instruction, is what I would say. I think if you look at the team yesterday, the way they moved as a team, or on Sunday, sorry, the way they moved as a team, the spaces were right in terms of full-backs or wing-backs and centre-backs and midfield area. Raskin was superb. And it's almost like the players know the game plan, they know the instruction, and they just need to go and carry it out. And under the previous manager, last couple of previous managers, it was almost like they just didn't know what they were doing. And, they've got a good enough squad and good enough players for the first time, and I don't know how long. I would say on Sunday, Rangers actually had a stronger bench than Celtic due to circumstance. But I would say that Barry Ferguson's been able to convey a clear message that players can understand and follow, and that's really shown. And I think that's where the difference lies. If you're asking me, where has it been all season? I just think a lack of understanding as to what's required from them, from the manager. Barry Ferguson seems to have got a clear message across, and I think that's the biggest difference. Yes, the whole, he knows the club, etc. It's a small added bonus, but I think way too much is made of that. I just think his instructions clear, concise, and the players follow it out to a T.
Someone else who knows the club, we heard from Alex Ray at the top of the podcast there. He was speaking to BBC Radio Scotland yesterday, and among other things, he said that the squad now, they have that belief that they can go toe-to-toe with Celtic, and that's been evident for a wee while now. I think anyone can see that, just not in the last two back-to-back wins. So turning it slightly to Celtic now, Rory, what does Brendan Rodgers need to do for this trip to Ibrox that will be coming post-split? Because it certainly seems like Rangers have cracked his code of late.
Yeah, and as much as, I've fairly criticised Clement so far, and for quite a number of months now, you've got to give him credit. He ran Celtic really, really close in the final. Very unlucky to miss out on penalties, and then, destroyed them at Ibrox, and then off the back of that, Barry Ferguson's managed to get a win at Parkhead. So from Celtic's point of view, Brendan Rodgers will be hurting. He's a man with a lot of pride. He's got a fantastic record in this fixture, and I think to lose back-to-back Old Firms, conceding 9 goals in the last 3 games as well, I think it'll dent his confidence. He would probably never admit it. I think it'll dent the players' confidence as well, and it just takes maybe a couple of results like that to swing. Not the balance, because Celtic have got a very strong mentality. I don't mean the balance of power in terms of pushing for league titles and things. Celtic have got that racked up, and they've been by far and away the best team, but it does instill belief in Rangers that they can beat Celtic. And see in that fixture, see if you are playing for Rangers and Celtic, you need that belief that you can win every single week, because if you don't, then the chances of you winning a league title are very slim. So what I think it has done is shifted the mentality within the Rangers squad. I think if you were to go before the cup final and Celtic got back to 2 each, I think Rangers would have crumbled. I really do. I think they would have crumbled. So I think from Celtic's point of view, they need to just concentrate on the fact that if you write both squads down, Celtic do have the superior squad. They've got an extremely talented manager as well. So I think ahead of the trip to Ibrox, I think Brendan Rodgers will work hard on what formation he's going to go with. For me, I think he probably got it wrong. Maeda probably should have started on the sides, as was evident in the second half. So look, I think a little bit of fine-tuning ahead of the trip to Ibrox. He'll probably have a better understanding of what Rangers are going to do. But overall, I don't think he'll be too concerned. They're in a fantastic position. They've been the best team in the country by a mile. They've got some great players. So I think it's just a case of trying to get it right on the day when it comes to the next Old Firm.
Speaking about getting it right on the day, we can't just focus on events in Glasgow with you here, Rory. You must have had a dream Derby day on Sunday, actually. A sensational result for Dundee at Tannadice. You're up watching Tony Docherty's side quite a lot. Just how crucial could that be in their battle to preserve their Premiership status?
But I don't think it can be understated. You finish watching the Old Firm and you think you can't really get much more entertainment, and then the Dundee Derby comes along and produces a quite sensational game. I don't think it can be understated. I mean, what a mad game. Red cards, penalties, right back scoring doubles. It was crazy. But I think with Kilmarnock picking up a late point the previous day, St Johnstone picking up a point, and I wouldn't go as far as saying they're rejuvenated to the point where they're putting Dundee and Kilmarnock under real pressure. There's still that little shadow lurking over Dundee at this moment in time. So to get a Derby win, to win 4-2, score 4 goals, 3 in the first half, that might just be the kick that Dundee need to push themselves up the league and get a couple of results, because let's be honest, they were dropping like a stone. So to go to Tannadice and win the game, it can't be understated as to what that does to the prospect of them trying to haul themselves out of that relegation playoff spot. But the game itself, Amy, was incredible. Glenn Middleton's goal to bring it back to 2-1 was sensational. You get the penalty, Tiffany's goal. It was just an absolute joy to watch.
It sure was. From preserving Premiership status to preserving Championship status after Queen's Park parted ways with Callum Davidson on Saturday, Dunfermline Athletic have now 2 cut ties with Michael Tidser after just 60 days in charge. 2 months, Rory, just 11 matches. It's an utterly astonishing and frankly atrocious spell for all involved, really. It's been clear from the off that fans have never really got on board or given Michael Tidser a chance. I was at the game on Friday night, the Fife Derby, ultimately his last game. It was a tough watch, but it was also fairly well known how long that the Pars pursued Michael Tidser, trying to get him from Kelty, eventually getting him. To call it quits so soon, whether or not it's the right call on the pitch and for football reasons, which is obviously what does matter, but this is still so far from a good look for the club, isn't it?
I think it's a bit of a shambles, to be honest. I mean, I do appreciate they've looked a little bit toothless in the last couple of games, in the derby against Falkirk. Well, it's not necessarily a derby location-wise, but there's a massive rivalry there then.
It's as good as, isn't it?
Yeah, following that up against Wraith Rovers. I think, I've spoken to a couple of people at Kelty, Scott Allen being one who, I've worked with a couple of times with the BBC, and he said, it took a little bit of time for Michael Tidser to really get his impression on the team and get a particular way of playing that he wanted to do. He says it doesn't happen overnight, and that's got to be relevant at Dunfermline as well. Obviously, with new owners and things like that, I was under the impression he was the man they wanted, but it seems knee-jerk, it seems a bit silly actually, but for me, you look at Hibs, they could have very easily done the same with Davy Gray. They didn't do it. He's eventually found a way of winning games, of getting a formation that works for him, and I've absolutely no doubt Michael Tidser would have been able to do the same. And it's a bit of a mockery, to be honest, after 11 games to sack your manager. I think given a bit more time, I'm sure he would have stayed in the league, and then he's got the summer to recruit his own players and things. So I think it's knee-jerk because they're panicking because Airdrie look like they're picking up a few points and they're slightly concerned that they're looking over their shoulder. But look, I would have had faith in the man you've appointed. If they chased him that much, then that credit surely doesn't wane after 11 games. So, and he's won a couple as well. So I found it indicative of the modern day game and quite sad, really.
Where do they go next, Rory? Because we speak a lot about where big clubs should be. Where should a club the size of Dunfermline be? They shouldn't probably be back in League One, but they are fighting for the lives down there. You mentioned a sort of rejuvenated Airdrie of sorts, sort of similar to St Johnstone. They just seem to be picking up results here and there and trying to claw some points back. Where do Dunfermline look now? The
difficulty they've got now is if they go down the route of a younger manager, then people will say, well, you may as well have stuck with Michael Tidser. The issue Dunfermline have got, and the route I see them going down, is they'll possibly appoint an experienced manager who is employed to keep them in the league. He'll keep them in the league, and then by November next year they'll be complaining about the style of play, and eventually it'll just be the same cycle again. And that's why you've got to be brave. You've got to be brave. You've got to stick by your decision making, and you've got to back yourself that you've made the right decision. I think it was far too early to relieve Michael Tidser of his duties. So if it was me, I would be looking at maybe not a similar profile to Michael Tidser, a bit more experience, but somebody with fresh ideas that can come in, and they might not see it as the time for fresh ideas, but I just think if you bring in somebody who's out of a job, who's really experienced at keeping teams in the league, he gets them out of trouble, and it's just rinse and repeat. So I don't know where they go from there. I would be looking at the kind of younger generation. I know Kevin Thompson's in at Rangers now. He's ex-Kelty Hearts, had similar success to Tidser, slightly more in terms of a promotion. That might not go down well, but that type of calibre or that type of idea, do you go all out and try and get Scott Brown from Ayr United? I know Dunfermline have quite a bit of money. They've got a big club. They've got a great infrastructure. But again, I don't know how that would go down because it's a bit of a similar appointment. So yeah, I don't know where they go. I just hope they don't go down the route of simply just the short term, try and keep the team in the league, prepared to give up any form of style of play, and then by November next year all the fans aren't happy.
Right then, let's turn our attention now to the Nations League playoff doubleheader. Scotland take on Greece in Greece on Thursday night before welcoming them to Hampden on Sunday. Both games televised live on the BBC, in case you didn't know. Both sides hoping to keep their place in League A. Stephen Kountourou from the Hellas Football podcast joins us now. Stephen, thanks very much for coming on. Right, let's get right into it. What can we expect from Greece come Thursday? How do they play? How do they like their opponents to set up? What are we looking for?
Well, Amy, thank you so much for having me on. Firstly, with Greece, it's going to be a very intriguing tie. Ivan Jovanovic, the manager, has prioritised these two games. He requested to the Greek Football Federation and to the Super League Board of Directors to postpone the playoffs for the Greek Super League so that there was more time to prepare for these two matches. So that just shows the priority he gives to this, this promotion relegation tie in the Nations League. In terms of style of play, Jovanovic sets up in a very hard sort of 4-3-3, sometimes 4-2-3-1, depending on the opponent, against better opposition, i.e. England. In the last kind of year or so, we played much more in the counter-attack. We had much more pacey wingers kind of being able to counter after soaking up all the pressure from England, especially in Wembley when that succeeded, and we won away in the capital. But yeah, against Scotland, it's going to be interesting because I feel like in terms of the pound for pound play, it's going to be quite an even match. So I think he'll do a combination of the two things that we've seen from him over the Nations League campaign, which is soak up the pressure from the midfield strength that Scotland have, and then try and counter from there, but also maybe try and prevent the midfield from having that ball possession as well, because we've shown that against kind of teams that we've been better against, like the Republic of Ireland, in the multitude of times we've faced them over the last year or so, and Finland as well in the Nations League. So I think it's going to be a very close tie between the two teams.
Yeah, Greece against Republic of Ireland is sort of similar to Scotland against Israel. It just always seems to happen every calendar year at least twice. You mentioned there the sort of importance that the manager has put on this, and calling for playoffs in the domestic game to be put on hold. How has that gone down, Stephen? Because that's something we talk about a lot here, not perhaps so much with our international game, but when clubs have European exploits, there's always that sort of conversation, should the league be doing more to step in to try and improve our game? How has that gone down, given that it's for international benefits?
Generally quite positively. I mean, it's been a natural end to the Greek Super League regular season anyway, because our league splits into two. It splits into three this season, I should say, with the new format change. So actually, it's been the right time to do so, and it makes a lot of sense rather than just playing one round of the playoff matches before the international break. They're now going to start on the end of March, and it just feels like a much more clean cut than previous years. And it's been a bit of a conversation in Greek football too, because there's been times when some of the big teams are still in Europe, and the league has either not been able to change those fixtures, maybe due to other fixtures being cancelled or being postponed. And in more recent times, the Greek Football Federation and the Greek Super League have been more open to doing that. And so generally, it's a positive thing that Greek supporters are taking from this, and I completely agree.
Absolutely prioritising player welfare as well, giving players the best possible chance. I think particularly when your captain's out, I can only imagine if Andy Robertson was missing for these games, how we'd all be feeling. In Greece, captain Tassos Bakasetas is missing. Where will his loss be felt, Stephen? What sort of impact does he have usually?
Well, Bakasetas has been a bit of a mixed figure with Greek fans over the years, because he's come in and at times he's been a passenger in games under previous managers, and certainly under previous manager Gus Poyet, he did start to impact games more. And people question why he was given the captaincy in the first place to begin with, because we thought, well, he's not really doing anything in the game to impact enough. He played in the number 10 position, but really he's a second striker, and he wasn't really doing the things he was supposed to be doing as a 10 or as a second striker. But he's now kind of improved, like I said, under Poyet and now under Jovanovic. he's been a bit more mixed in recent times. He's had his injury issues, and that's why he's missing for this international break. And so the biggest thing we'll miss from him is his leadership, because that's why he's clearly been given the captaincy. And people have started to understand that on the pitch, off the pitch, he has that leadership and that experience that's kind of galvanized the team to, well, I can't say qualify for major tournaments, but certainly come close. And in our Nations League campaign, which was a huge success by our standards, he was a big, impactful player there. But there's other leaders on the pitch as well. And Andrew Robertson's teammate from Liverpool, Kostas Tsimikas, is probably one of the favourites to take up the mantle as the captain for these two games.
You mentioned Tsimikas there. I was going to touch on him. He's probably the name that is maybe most familiar to most in Scotland. So if you're looking outside of him, who else should we be looking out for? Who else is a threat? Who else is Greece key men?
Well, the biggest key man in the Nations League for us was Christos Solis, Club Brugge winger, having a very good season, obviously, barring the tie against Aston Villa in the Champions League, where he didn't have the best of games in the first leg. But he's been excellent for us. He's been the exact kind of creativity, the dynamism on the wing that we've missed for ages. And he didn't feature during Gus Poyet's campaign to try and qualify for Euro 2024. And that was one of the big reasons why we didn't reach the tournament itself in Germany last year, because we lacked that kind of energy in our team. And so he's absolutely going to be one of the key players in this tie. Just to think off the top of my head, Vangelis Pavlidis, who's been excellent this season for Benfica. He's not quite ever been able to fully translate his club form over to his international form, but hopefully this season hopefully these games he does what he did against England at Wembley. And there's a load of young talented players coming through that won't feature perhaps as greatly as they will in the future, but they are like highly touted. So Christos Mouzakidis from Olympiakos, one of the brightest young players in the Greek Super League this season, he's in part of the squad. Konstantinos Garetsas, who we had to fight tooth and nail from the Belgium FA to stop him representing them. And that was seen as a big coup for Greek football, because Garetsas, for us, he's only 17, but this kid is rated as not just, a potential like decent talented player. This is supposed to be rated as one of the big players for the future in international football. So amazing that we've got him, and hopefully in the future we'll see the best of him for the national team.
For you, Stephen, I'm very happy to hear all this excitement, and certainly ones for the future. And I think over the last year or so, you mentioned how beneficial and how much joy has been brought by Greek football. I think it will have been felt in many quarters up here, particularly those wins over England. But give Scotland some hope. Where are the weaknesses in this Greece side?
Well, it's interesting because I think that I think Scotland and Greece are quite evenly matched, I think the big difference is midfield. I would say that Scotland's midfield is much stronger than Greece's, and the area in which we struggle the most is midfield, because we have some decent players who play in the middle of the park. We have Manolis Siopis, who's a pretty dynamic midfielder who was at Cardiff City up till recently. He's now come back to Greece to play for Panathinaikos. A big miss for us is Dimitris Gourbelis, who Ivan Jovanovic really favoured when Jovanovic was manager of Panathinaikos, and we only found out yesterday he's out injured and will miss both games. So he's one of the midfield linchpins that helped us beat England at Wembley. So he's going to be a miss. That's why I'm very conscious of how we set up, because if we set up with three midfielders, even without Gourbelis, and with the back line of Kostas Mavropanos from West Ham and Gouliarakis from Wolfsburg, that's going to be huge in containing the likes of Scott McTominay and if we go with the midfield too, I think we're just going to get completely overrun.
Yes, Stephen, good luck containing Scott McTominay. Many have tried, many have failed. I think that's the perfect note to wrap this one on. Thank you very much to Rory Loy and Stephen Kountourou for joining me, and thank you for listening. Remember, we are here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so to make sure you don't miss out, subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. Bye-bye for now.
On BBC Sounds. From life aboard a Russian submarine to chairman of Hearts Football Club.
At this stage, he was the hero.
But as his controversial decisions escalated,
they said, we're going to sack George. And I'm going, you can't do this.
How did Vladimir Romanov go from Hearts saviour to a wanted man?
It caused a whole load of chaos and havoc.
Romanov, Tsar of Hearts. Listen now on BBC Sounds.